There comes a time in the story of every nation when it must rise, not just for its economy, not just for its political pride, but for its identity, its dignity, and its place in the moral fabric of this world. And right now, my friends, that moment has come for India, because let's talk about what just happened. Let's talk about what we've all seen, echoing in the corridors of diplomacy, rolling across the screens of news outlets, tweeted from podiums and presidential chairs, another threat, another warning, another unjustified attempt to hold a proud rising nation hostage with tariffs, with pressure, with the veiled assumption that it will fold. But India did not fold. No, India stood tall, looked right back across that sea of steel and politics and said with calm, fire, and grace, "This is unjustified." Now I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine a people 1.4 billion strong, stretching from the snowy peaks of the Himalayas to the warm waves of the Indian Ocean. A nation that has given this world so much wisdom, labor, culture, resilience. A democracy carved not just from history but from hope. India is not a silent player on the world stage. India is not the quiet, obedient partner in someone else's playbook. And India is not afraid to speak when it knows it is being wronged. President Trump once again decided to rattle the tariff sabers, 20%, 25%, maybe even more. Threats wrapped in the language of negotiation, warnings disguised as business decisions. And let me tell you something, that kind of posture might have worked in another time with another country, but not anymore. Not with this India, not with this generation, because India has seen too much, fought too hard, bled too deep to allow itself to be cornered with the tools of economic warfare. It remembers colonialism. It remembers being told what it's worth, what it must give, and how it must bow. And let me be very clear, those days are over. India remembers 1947. It remembers standing on the edge of a midnight hour and declaring, "We are free." And freedom is not just about borders and flags, it's about not being economically bullied into silence. So when that threat came, when those tariff announcements rumbled across the Pacific, India didn't scream, it didn't plead, it didn't posture. No, it simply stood up and said, "We consider this targeting unjustified." 4 words. And that's all it took, because power doesn't always come in noise. Sometimes power is quiet. Sometimes power is a calm voice saying, "We are not afraid of you. We see through this. And we will respond not with panic, but with purpose." Now I know what some people are thinking, "Oh, Oprah, this is just politics. This is just business as usual." But I say no. No, this is not just another chapter in some dusty trade war playbook. This is about respect. This is about partnership. This is about recognizing the dignity of a nation that has more engineers than America has soldiers. This is about seeing India not as a pawn but as a peer, because when you slap tariffs on a country's exports, when you target its industries with broad, sweeping punishment, what you're saying is you don't matter unless you bend to my will. And that's not how friends treat each other. That's not how democratic partners behave. And that's certainly not how one sovereign nation engages another in the 21st century. India has been patient. India has been fair. It has sat across the table with the U.S. again and again, willing to discuss, willing to adjust, willing to compromise. But what it won't do, what it cannot do, is accept bullying as diplomacy. You see, this is not the first time this story has been written. We've watched the same pattern over and over again. Threat, bluff, retreat, threat, bluff, retreat. And in the middle of it all, countries like India trying to build a better future for their people being dragged into someone else's circus. But India is not playing the game anymore. India is writing its own rules now. It's saying, we're not going to be punished for standing tall. We're not going to be punished for growing strong. And we are certainly not going to apologize for wanting to be treated with the same fairness and respect that every other nation deserves. Because behind every product the U.S. wants to slap a tariff on, there are Indian workers, there are Indian farmers, there are small business owners and families who depend on those industries to feed their children, to pay their bills, to dream bigger dreams. And let's be real, this isn't about economics. This is about leverage. This is about ego. This is about the illusion of dominance in a world that is rapidly waking up. President Trump is playing a game of numbers, but India is standing in the truth of its values. And I want to tell you something, my friends. Truth doesn't tremble in the face of a tweet. It doesn't back down when faced with power, because truth has something tariffs can never buy: integrity. And let's not forget, India didn't start this. India didn't ask for this. India didn't provoke this. What it did do was rise. It innovated, it exported, it competed. And that's what's really bothering some people. That's the root of the discomfort, because when you've been used to being the one setting the terms, it's hard to accept that the world is shifting, but shifted. And India, with its booming economy, with its space missions, with its digital revolution, is no longer waiting for a seat at the table. It's building its own table. It's inviting the world to come eat, come talk, come trade with fairness, with openness, with equality. This isn't just about rice or medicine or steel. It's about a nation saying, we will not be targeted. It's about a country sending a message, not just to America, but to the entire global community. Respect is not negotiable. And to those who say, well, it's just Trump being Trump, let me say this: when you hold the power of the presidency, your words are not just wind, they are policy, they are message, they shape markets, they affect families, they alter the path of diplomacy. And if you use that power recklessly, if you use it to intimidate instead of inspire, then you are not leading. You are bullying. And when I think about the essence of leadership, true leadership, I don't think about the loudest man in the room. I don't think about those who bark threats across oceans and continents. No, I think about those who stand in the fire and still speak with grace. I think about those who know that strength isn't about how hard you punch, but how deeply you're rooted in principle. India, in this moment, is showing the world what grace under fire looks like. Because while one man threatens tariffs and paints trade as a battlefield, India is reminding us all that trade is about connection, it's about opportunity, it's about trust, it's about building bridges across cultures, not tearing them down for political theater. And yet again and again we see the same performance: blame the outsider, threaten the exporter, stir up fear about jobs, and pretend that complex economic realities can be solved with a stroke of a pen. But we know better, because here's the truth. Those tariffs, if imposed, won't just hurt India, they'll hurt America too. They'll hurt the very people the threats claim to protect. They'll raise prices on medicine, on textiles, on software, on goods that millions of Americans use every single day, goods that don't appear magically on shelves, but are made with skill, with labor, with partnership from the other side of the world. You don't build an alliance by turning your back. You don't strengthen your economy by isolating yourself from the very partners who helped build it. And you certainly don't secure your future by dismantling the present. But here we are again, and this time India is not playing along. Now I want you to pause and imagine what it must have felt like inside those halls of government in Delhi when that tariff threat rolled in, when officials and ministers saw once again the same pattern of provocation. The easy route would have been to stay silent, to appease, to say, let's not make waves, let's not respond. But that's not the India of 20. This India understands its value. This India remembers the times it was underestimated, overlooked, used as a back office, treated as a side note in someone else's strategy. And now that India is rising, oh, how the tables have turned. Now that India is innovating, exporting, leading, it's not being welcomed with open arms, it's being threatened. And that's why India's response matters so much, because it wasn't just a rejection of tariffs, it was a rejection of the idea that it must earn its place by staying silent, that it must trade its dignity for economic crumbs. India's message was simple yet thunderous. We will not accept unjustified targeting. We will not bend to unfair pressure. We will not allow economic coercion to silence our sovereignty. And let me tell you something. Those words, that tone, that clarity, that was not just meant for Washington. That was a signal to every rising nation across the globe that's been told to wait its turn. That was a message to Africa, to Southeast Asia, to South America, To every nation that has faced the heavy hand of power, disguised as partnership, it said you don't have to shrink to be seen. You don't have to beg to be respected. You don't have to be silent to be safe. India is standing tall, not just for itself, but for a more balanced world. And you know what else? This isn't personal. This isn't about revenge or retaliation. India is not lashing out. It's not cutting off ties or launching its own trade war. No, India is doing what grown nations do. It's defending its interests with facts, with diplomacy, with resolve. It's calling out the imbalance, not to destroy the relationship, but to restore its fairness. Because somewhere along the line, some people forgot that India is not a soft target anymore, that it's not the country of yesterday's headlines. This is a nation with one of the world's fastest growing economy, a country that sent a mission to the moon and came back with more than just data. They came back with pride, a country that's teaching the world how to code, how to heal, how to solve, and still it's being threatened with tariffs as if fear is a currency. But fear doesn't run this world anymore. And to President Trump, I say this: you can't build a legacy by burning bridges. You can't win loyalty through intimidation, and you certainly cannot lead the free world by targeting your allies. India is not the enemy. India is not the threat. India is the future, and this future will not be intimidated. Now I know this story will keep unfolding. There will be new statements, new press conferences, new tweets, but underneath it all, the real question remains: are we building a global order based on respect or on rivalry? Are we going to partner with rising nations or try to suppress them? Because let me remind you, tariffs are not just taxes, they're messages. They say you're not welcome, you're not equal, you're not valuable unless you play by our rules. And India is responding: we're not asking to be welcome, we're telling you we're already here. This is not about nationalism, it's about sovereignty, it's about fairness, it's about standing in the storm and saying, we know who we are, and we will not be moved. And let me tell you something personal. I've seen what it looks like when people are targeted unfairly. I've seen it in homes, in classrooms, in boardrooms, and in governments. And I've seen what happens when someone finally stands up and says, no more. That moment when the voice rises, when the hand stops shaking, when the eyes meet the gaze of power and refuse to look away, that moment changes everything. India just had that moment, and the world is watching. Because this isn't just about economics, this is about what kind of world we want to live in. One where the strong threaten the rising, or one where dignity holds the same value as GDP. India has made its choice. It has chosen dignity. It has chosen truth. It has chosen itself. I want you to picture this, not through the lens of politics, but through the eyes of the millions who wake up each day in India, whose lives are touched by this very issue. Men and women who lace up their shoes to go to the textile mills in Surat, the IT parks in Hyderabad, the pharmaceutical labs in Ahmedabad, and the spice markets of Kochi. These are not statistics, these are lives, families, stories. Every time a tariff is announced, it doesn't just raise the cost of goods, it casts a shadow over the dinner table. It adds uncertainty to futures already being built with sweat and faith. And yet despite that, despite the looming threat of 25% tariffs, you know what India is doing? It's still building, still believing, still standing. Because this is not a nation that folds under pressure. This is a nation that has risen through famine, through colonial chains, through terrorist attacks, through global recessions, and it's still rising. It's always rising. So when a country like that says the targeting is unjustified, that is not a press release, that is a moral declaration. That is the voice of a billion hearts saying, we are not less, we will not be treated as less. And let me speak directly to America for a moment. This isn't just about India, it's about you too. It's about what kind of friend you want to be. Because this country, this ally, this strategic partner called India has stood by you in peace talks and climate debates, in defense procurement and technology sharing. India has offered you trade, talent, and trust, but trust is a two-way street. And when a friend threatens you over and over again, when a friend places tariffs on your hard work, paints you as a problem instead of a partner, that trust begins to wear thin. Now don't get me wrong, I believe in America. I believe in its ability to rise above its politics and remember its purpose. But what we're seeing right now from this one administration, from this one man, is a weaponization of trade that doesn't just hurt America's image, it hurts its soul. Because how can you preach free markets and fair trade on one hand and slap punitive tariffs with the other? How can you demand loyalty while behaving like the only loyalty that matters is to your own ambition? India sees through this, and more importantly, India refuses to mirror it, because let's be real, India could retaliate. It has the power, it has the means, it could match tariff for tariff, escalation for escalation, but what it's doing instead is far more powerful. It's choosing clarity over chaos, it's choosing dialogue over drama, and that's how you know a nation is truly strong, when it refuses to be dragged into the mud, even when it's provoked. And let's talk about what's really fueling this conflict. Is it really about trade imbalances? Is it really about protecting American work? Or is it about the discomfort that comes from watching a non-Western country rise without permission? You see, there's an old narrative that some in the West still cling to, the idea that development must happen on their terms, in their image, with their blessing. But India never asked for permission. India rose on its own terms, and for some that independence is threatening, but that's the future of this world, that's the new reality. It's not a world where one nation dictates the terms of growth, it's a world of multipolarity, of collaboration, of mutual respect. And the sooner leaders like President Trump understand that, the better. Now let me tell you a story. Many years ago, in the early days of my career, I was told more than once that I should just be grateful to have a seat at the table, that I should smile, nod and not make too much noise, and maybe if I was lucky I could stay. But I knew in my spirit that I didn't come into this world just to stay silent. I came to speak, to own my worth, to reshape the table itself. That's what India is doing right now. It's not begging to be included, it's not pleading for favors, it's sitting at the global table proud, unbent, and saying, we're not just part of this conversation, we are essential to it, and that should be celebrated, not punished. Because when you punish rising powers for rising, all you do is expose your own insecurity. India is not here to replace anyone, it's not here to dominate, it's here to contribute, to collaborate, to lead with humility and strength. And if America cannot recognize that, if it continues to respond to India's rise with tariffs instead of trust, it risks losing not just a trade partner, but a moral partner. Let me say that again for the people in the back. India is not just a trade partner, it is a moral partner, a partner in democracy, a partner in diversity, a partner in peace, and that kind of partnership should never be taken for granted. So where do we go from here? We go forward, not by doubling down on threats, but by doubling down on truth. We go forward by asking the hard questions. What are we really afraid of? Why does the success of others feel like a threat instead of an opportunity? Because here's what I know deep in my bones. When you live from a place of fear, but when you live from a place of partnership, you expand. India is choosing expansion, growth, dialogue, and the United States, if it's wise, will meet India, because the world we are building, this shared world of AI and clean energy, of interconnected economies and planetary stakes, requires cooperation, not coercion. This is bigger than any one president, bigger than any one policy. This is about how we treat each other, about whether we punish strength or reward it, about whether we build a world rooted in fear or rooted in fairness. India has spoken. Now it's time for America to listen. There's something I want every young Indian to hear, and I want every American to listen to. Your worth is not defined by someone else's discomfort with your success. Your voice does not need to be softened just because it's finally being heard. Your progress does not need to come with an apology, because you have earned your place, not just at the table but in the history being written right now. India's rise is not a threat, it is a mirror, and mirrors can be uncomfortable because they reflect back not just our strengths, but our insecurities. And right now, what this tariff threat reveals is something deeper than trade. It shows us a world where old powers are afraid of a new balance. It shows us what happens when the script changes and the author doesn't want to let go of the pen. But let me tell you something about India. This is a nation that has held its identity through waves of history, through the fires of colonization, through the burdens of poverty, through every prediction that said it wouldn't make it. And here it is, defying gravity every single day, and doing it not with domination, but with determination. So when Trump pulls out his tariff playbook, he's not just playing politics, he's poking at the very soul of what India represents today. The rise of the self-made, the unapologetic, the unafraid, and that is something no tariff can silence. And I want to speak to the Indian workers for a moment. The ones who stitch our clothes, who write the code in our apps, who roll out the pharmaceutical solutions that save lives around the globe. You are not invisible, you are not disposable, you are not a line on a spreadsheet for someone else's negotiation. You are the backbone of a rising giant. And you matter, because this issue, this so-called trade dispute, it's not about abstract numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about real people, real lives. And what hurts more than the tariffs themselves is the arrogance behind them, the assumption that India will just take it, that it will flinch, that it will panic. But India did not flinch, India did not panic, India stood, and not with threats or retaliation, not with chest thumping, but with dignity, with a statement rooted not in emotion but in principle. This targeting is unjustified. You see, that's a word we don't hear enough in the world of politics. Unjustified. Because to say something is unjustified is to say we see the deeper truth, we reject the game, we are awake to what this really is. And when India used that word, it was saying, we will not be part of your performance, we will not dance for your applause, we will not shrink for your comfort. That's courage, and we all know that true courage isn't like, it doesn't come dressed in red hats or shouted in press conferences. True courage is quiet, it is firm, it is the mother feeding her child in a village who knows that this trade decision it is the young developer in Bengaluru who keeps building a startup even as his work is being undervalued on the global stage. It is the farmer in Punjab who asks not for favors but for fairness. This moment, my friends, is not just about the powerful, it's about the everyday people who carry the weight of these decisions. And when we reduce them to pawns in a political match, we betray the very ideals we claim to uphold: freedom, equality. India remembers sanctions and exclusions, exploitation and silence, and India remembers the taste of freedom, and it will not go back. You don't grow from being dictated to, you grow from being seen, and India is finally being seen. But being seen does not mean being accepted, and sometimes the light of your truth will blind those who only know how to walk in shadow. That's what this tariff threat is really about. It's about what happens when the old world order starts to tremble, when countries that used to be told where they belong begin to define that place for themselves, when former colonies become global leaders, when voices that were once excluded from decision-making are now writing policy. And that is beautiful, that is progress, that is exactly what we should be celebrating. But instead, threats, instead, tariffs, instead, fear of losing control, fear of being matched in power, fear of having to share the spotlight. But let me ask you this, what kind of leader feels threatened? by the success of others. What kind of power is so fragile that it cannot handle partnership? Real power lifts others up, real leadership invites others in, and real freedom means allowing others to be free. India has chosen to be free, economically, politically, culturally, and what India is doing now is drawing a line that says, we welcome partnership, but not punishment. We believe in diplomacy. And I want every young leader in India watching this unfold to understand what this means. It means you are living in a new in India that does not whisper when it's been wronged, an India that does not hide behind smiles, an India that does not mistake diplomacy for submission. It means you will grow up in a country that is not afraid to speak truth to power, and to the young people of America. Hold your leaders accountable. Ask why your country is trying to push away one of its most strategic partners. Ask who benefits when relationships are built on threats instead of trust. Ask what kind of world you want to inherit. This is about the world choosing whether to keep playing by the rules of fear, or to write a new story based on fairness. India has written its chapter, with clarity, with courage, with conviction. Now the question is,